What it do, it's your boy D Sly coming to you with a week 2 reflection of the Sag Nasty If Anybody Asks Me podcast. I just want to first of all give just a big shout out and thanks to all the people who reached out to me privately, and also to the contributors to the podcast. I just received a lot of messages of encouragement, and I really appreciate that, and I just want to say thank you for even participating. I would love to see the comment section more lit, but now I'm starting to see people don't want to share necessarily in that capacity, which I totally respect. People are not always there, but at the same time it feels like censorship a little bit. It's like your class, stories from your class, your age group, and it's kind of a shame that we can't have more dialogue about those things. But that is how the world is these days, and I respect that, I understand that, and to be honest, maybe it's wiser not to share these things, not to comment, and people lose jobs over stuff like that, and sometimes it pulls us more apart than brings us together. I mean, think about the Himmeter comment, just giving the perspective again from when I was that age, and how much of a effect that had on people. That's another thing that I want to reflect on, is that the views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the representative of the views that the individuals and myself have today. It's more of a reflection on how we viewed the world at that time. If we had to have a conversation about our views today, that might be a way different conversation. I think usually at the end of each interview, we kind of reflect on what we would do differently, or what we would say to that young person. And I think that's a chance to just get a glimpse of what our views are like today. And so far, if you look at most of the people I've spoken to, their opinions have changed drastically since they were like 8 years old, and naturally so, right? With more knowledge, with more information comes more knowledge. So I think that as you follow this podcast, you have to just keep that in mind. I guess especially in the second perspective, because there was a lot of mistakes made by the individual, and now when she reflects on those things, she regrets them, and maybe not regret is not the right word, but she doesn't agree with the behaviors that she had, but she understands them now, and that's important to grow and move forward. And that's what I was hoping that we could do collectively, is look back, understand, gain that knowledge, and use it to grow and move forward. But things have changed a little bit, and that's okay. That's okay. I'm just kind of here for the journey and enjoying the ride. As you can see, it's not over yet. We have another just cool, drastically different interview coming up next. Another perspective 3. I'm super excited to, there was just so many lessons in there. And I learned in just different ways and from each perspective. I don't know if it's the same for you following, but for me, I just learned so much from each perspective, but I'm super excited for this third perspective that's coming up. Beyond that, another thing that stood out to me is GM. So many people ended up in Saginaw via GM, from their grandparents or their parents. A lot of people that I've spoken to, GM played a big role in their lives. I didn't end up in Saginaw because of GM, actually. My father worked for Sears, and when he was early in his career, there was a position that opened in St. Louis. So my father and my mother relocated to St. Louis. That's actually where my brother was conceived, if I understand correctly. And then a job opened up in Saginaw. And then that's how my my family ended up in Saginaw, just because that job opened up there. I can't remember the name of our mall. Was it Fashion Valley, maybe? There was a similar mall in San Diego, so I always get the two confused. Fashion Valley, I think it was. So that's my father ended up working there in the lawn and garden department. I think is where he started. That's how my family ended up in Saginaw. So it's kind of interesting how GM. I never really thought about it. I mean, it makes sense, of course, because it's Michigan, or at least Detroit, is the car city. It's the car capital of the world, I guess you could say. But it's interesting how GM plays such a larger role than I had first realized. Yeah, but besides that, we're going to keep going. Who knows what happens next? I'm still looking for some more interviews. I have a dream interview, but I think it's going to be really hard to get that interview because of a lot of reasons. But I hope, I'm crossing my fingers, that somehow, I don't know, some way, I'll be able to land this interview with this individual. His story is one that I think we all want to hear, and I think for him, it's necessary for him to be able to tell the story too. It will help him maybe grow and heal and move past a lot of trauma. I mean, that's not the aim of the podcast to tell like sad stories or anything like that, but I definitely want the stories that we have to be told. There's one other interview which I don't really have an individual picked out who I want to tell the story, but there's a subject that I'm very, very curious about that is very integral to our class of 2000 that I would like to hear about too, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. We're going to try to keep it moving, and I hope that you enjoy the podcast so far. I'm learning as an interviewer. Definitely see myself interrupting the guests more than I want. Sometimes it was strategic, but usually it was just zeal. I was too excited. And, there's kind of like a mix of conversation and interview, and I think you need to lean one way or the other, and I prefer to have the interview, but because I really want to know what the people say, I don't want to interrupt them. So I have to work on that. There's some technical things that I would like to improve upon. I'm still learning. I don't know anything about the technical side, so I also want to improve on that. And yeah, again, just thank you. And yeah, see you soon. I'm seeking